compensation comments and notes. Let's talk through some things to keep in mind regarding compensation in the offer. Here are the learning outcomes for this video. By the end of the video, you should 1. Understand that employers set compensation through a process called benchmarking. 2. Understand the market factors impacting compensation. 3. Understand the difference between pay and pay rate. 4. Understand the pros and cons of equity compensation. And 5. Understand the importance of cash compensation. Let's get started. To start, it's helpful to understand how employers determine compensation. Employers have to set total compensation for a job high enough to encourage job applications and competitive enough to entice the person offered the job to actually accept it. To make sure its offer is competitive, the employer checks its compensation against the compensation for the same job at other companies. This process is called benchmarking. Several factors impact the amount of compensation in an offer. First, the greater the skills or experience required for a job, typically the higher the compensation. Next, if there's greater demand for a job but a limited supply of workers, this will also increase compensation. Continuing on, managers are typically paid more than individual contributors, and managers who have more authority are paid even more. There can also be a relationship between time commitment and compensation, meaning employees who are required to work more are paid more. And finally, cost of living is a factor. Jobs located in expensive cities require higher compensation. On that last point, you need to make sure you understand the cost of living in the city of your job offer if you've never lived there before. And also be sure to perform comparative analysis on the compensation if your offer allows you to work in more than one city. There are cost of living calculators available for free online that can help you perform this analysis. For example, you might find that a $75,000 job in Nashville is better than a $170,000 job in New York City because Nashville's a much cheaper place to live. You should also analyze the pay rate in your offer. The pay rate is the compensation divided by the hours worked. For example, what if you were choosing between a job that offered a salary of $120,000 and a job that offered a salary of $80,000? You might be tempted to pick the first job, but what if I told you that you had to work 65 hours a week for that job, but only 40 hours a week for the $80,000 job? Taking the hours worked into account makes the decision a bit harder. Make sure that you understand any conditions tied to your offered compensation. Some compensation only becomes available over time, which is called vesting. For example, you might be offered a stock award to join a company, but that stock might vest over 5 years, meaning you only receive 1/5 of it every year. And if you leave the company before you're fully vested, meaning you leave before the 5-year mark, then you might lose all of that stock depending on how the vesting was structured. There can also be conditions that require you to repay some of your compensation based on something you did. This is called a clawback. For example, if you receive a sign-on bonus to join a company, but then you leave the company within a year, you'll probably have to repay the full amount of the sign-on bonus. If you receive equity compensation as part of an offer, you should understand the pros and cons. A couple of pros to start. First, equity compensation can turn out to be lucrative if the company achieves sustained growth. Imagine being an early Microsoft or Amazon employee who received stock. These employees are pretty rich right now. Second, equity compensation aligns the company and employees to work toward a shared goal of company success. There can also be some cons to equity compensation. First, equity compensation is less accessible and more complex than cash compensation. Second, there's always the risk that this compensation turns out to be less lucrative or even worthless if the company isn't successful. There are other pros and cons, but the takeaway is that you should decide if you're comfortable with the structure of your offer in terms of the ratio of cash to equity compensation. Your offer compensation is a combination of cash and benefits, and maybe equity. While you should consider the total package as you analyze your offer, the bulk of the package will most likely be your cash compensation, so you'll probably weigh that component the most. A couple notes on budgeting and taxes to end. For budgeting, it's probably a good idea to be conservative and not assume that you'll receive all your incentive pay every year. Incentive pay typically varies year to year, so you don't want to make any big financial decisions based on the assumption that you'll receive all of it. For taxes, understand that your compensation and benefits package and timing will impact your taxes. For example, cash and equity compensation can be taxed differently, and the timing of things like vesting might impact your taxes in unexpected ways. That's the end of this foundational video, but just a reminder that this video is part of a longer playlist. The playlist is in chronological order, meaning videos at the beginning of the playlist cover things that occur at the beginning of a job search and vice versa. If you liked this video, then you should check out the other videos in the playlist. If you thought this video was confusing, then try going backwards in the playlist to learn more about job search up until this point, or even forwards in the playlist to see how things come together. Thanks.